Chapter 30, Bu Qingwen Part. Xie Junping nearly fell head first after receiving this shadowy scare. He was in a completely sorry state, and he couldn't help but curse with a foul mouth. Luo Nan had been able to see things clearer since he had the sensing capabilities of the heavily chained crow. It's an animal of the wetlands, seems to be a muskrat. Are there any other exits aside from the route we took to get inside? The muskrat was a more commonly seen animal in the wetlands jungle of Acumen College. A fully matured muskrat had a length of 30 to 40 centimeters. Its tail was about 20 to 30 centimeters long. The one that had skirted by was smaller than a normal muskrat by more than half. It seemed like it wasn't a fully matured yet, but its movements were seriously nimble. Xie Junping spoke through gritted teeth. This place absolutely wasn't abandoned for just 1 or 2 years. I fear that it's been a long time since this place has become a critter's nest or something. Be careful not step on some animal shit. His last word was spat halfway out and was then forcefully sucked back in. The illuminating beam of light just so happened to cut into a spacious area. Xie Junping could now see a circular chair that utilized the empty space to the largest degree. 2 stools placed randomly to the side, wall lights carved inside the tree wall, and a few exquisite wall-hanging bookshelves and decorations. Anyone who looked at this would see that this room was set up to be a resting area. How big could a hole in a tree be? The usable area before their eyes absolutely didn't exceed 3 square meters. Obviously, it was impossible to place down a bed, but this exquisite layout had utilized the special characteristics of the tree's ring-shaped space to the greatest degree. A hint of leisure unfolded before them. Xie Junping immediately forgot his preceding words. He clicked his tongue repeatedly. To create this leisurely area, I don't understand. There's another floor on top. Luo Nan pointed at the stone steps that continued to extend above, continuing to move forward. Why do I feel that this project is not the least bit lacking when compared to gear? Especially since it was able to be kept a secret for so many years. Mouths were sealed way too tightly. Xie Junping followed Luo Nan, climbing up. His impression of this place was turning a bit better. The two reached up a floor higher while they were talking. This was also the uppermost floor of this tree-hole cabin. The layout here was much simpler, looking a bit spacious at first glance. There was only a table carved into the tree wall, and a stool modified from an irregular growth of the withered tree in front of the table. The surface of the table was very plain, with only a circular plate placed on top of it. Xie Junping recognized it to be the base of an old photo projector album. It probably already had its battery drained, extinguishing the projection, but it should provide extremely straightforward clues with just a recharge of electricity. Luo Nan's attention was on every location within the hollowed tree. He fumbled around and took out quite a few clamps, braces, and other fantastical oddities. Most of them were set up, centered around the table. It was clear that this was a workshop room from each and every angle. As long as the corresponding equipment were installed, it would be completely possible to perform research work here. It was quite sufficient for any designer. Xie Junping was to the side looking with interest. He squeezed his way inside, and it seemed like Luo Nan wasn't able to pull out any more support devices and the like. Luo Nan moved directly in front of the table, not wanting to be squeezed in with Xie Junping. There were no wall-hanging installations here, in accordance with this area being the most spacious. But through careful observation, Luo Nan could see an irregular long circle of grain that took up an area that was roughly 1 square meter large. He reached out with his hand to touch it, exerting a bit of force. The inner bark wall of this area actually unfolded like a scroll painting. It opened up on 2 sides. The illuminating light of the sky shot inside at the next moment. The change in lighting caused Xie Junping at the side to suddenly turn his head. They had actually spent more than half an hour in torment in the laboratory room and in the tree cabin. It was already around 6 o'clock. Night had already descended upon Xie City, causing the light of the outer world to be fairly dusky. There was only the emergence of a fuzzy outline of gear located several hundred meters away within the gloomy night of the marshland's jungle. It was impossible to see clearly with the naked eye. But for some unknown reason, Luo Nan felt quite moved at this moment. Perhaps this was due to him being at the observation platform. The information provided by the designer of gear was understood perfectly clearly. Then Xie Junping suddenly burst out with great laughter to the side. "Signal, I have signal." Luo Nan ignored him, looking through the window of this observation platform to continue to look at gear in the far-off distance. The fuzzy scene revealed to his naked eyes wasn't special, but a plainer map of the building still existed with his mind. It included the impression of the viewing angle from before. Luo Nan had a sudden realization as soon as he mentally collected all these elements. It was as if the distant building had been eroded by a whole era of civilization. Only this corroded shell remained standing against the forces of nature, having underwent heavy and great changes. Traces of the arrogance of industrial era of order were all over every edge and corner of the building. It was inharmonious with the naturally muddled environment, but in the end, it achieved a compromise within this boundless darkness. This sudden rise of emotion made Luo Nan open his notebook in an instant. He used his fluorescent pen to portray lines that captured the visual impression assaulting his face. When Xie Junping finished cheering, he turned around, saw Luo Nan's actions, and grew a bit angry. Did this guy really have a drawing addiction? But soon his feelings changed to be a bit at ease. Yup, this sort of foolish and passionate character shouldn't be a grim and ruthless fellow. Xie Junping walked back to Luo Nan lightly and quietly. He extended his head to look, and was met with simple and even crude lines. If he hadn't known the depicted subject ahead of time, he absolutely wouldn't have been able to make the link between the drawing beneath Luo Nan's pen and the building in the jungle ahead of him. Yet when he realized what this drawing was depicting, he unexpectedly felt quite moved. Most notably was the twisted structure within the rippling water. It seemed to express a certain primordial and incorporeal force. Alrighty then, if he's not Picasso, then he's Van Gogh. Luo Nan drew his sketches with a quick hand. Soon he closed his notebook and let out a sigh of breath in satisfaction. Luo Nan already had a thicker interest in this building now. He couldn't help asking, "Who's the designer of this place?" Xie Junping shrugged his shoulders. "I'm pretty much stumped by your question. This building has at least 20 years of history to it. I was just a small baby when this thing was built, and you weren't even born yet. However, man, with Signal, we can talk about anything. The AI will absolutely have basic relevant information." Xie Junping had been stifled broken through this experience. The heavens and earth had ignored him during his greatest time of need. He connected online while raging through gritted teeth, receiving his temporary authorization from the student council once more. From this moment on, He held the absolute ultimate power against that damned laboratory once again. There will be a day, be it morning or evening, when I will stuff that old geezer Yan Hong and let him have a good taste. It doesn't matter what gutter he's hiding in, I'll. During his unyielding display of hate, Xie Junping was finally able to start each of the various laboratory system modules once again. He also searched for relevant information and found the original design drawings that had been stored as digital records. They included the designer's name. He used the powerful capabilities of his wristband to project the result as augmented reality. An image appeared floating in the air. Sole designer, Bu Qingwen. Wow, looks like she's a girl from the signature. The characters are so pretty. Xie Junping twisted his head over and sized out the furnishings within the treehouse, but he was unable to see anything that displayed a specific and distinct female style. However, the resting room on the floor below, with its exquisite and cozy setup, seemed to be enough to verify Xie Junping's theory. Xie Junping's tiny excitement wasn't worthy of receiving a response from Luo Nan. Xie Junping turned his head to look and was met with Luo Nan staring motionless at the designer's name and handwritten signature displayed on the hologram. Luo Nan's breathing was practically one with the surrounding air. It was completely frozen. Chapter 30, Bu Qingwen, Part 2-2. Nan, Junior Nan. Xie Junping called out towards Luo Nan in a probing manner, but he still didn't receive any response. Luo Nan stood there in a daze until he finally budged 10 seconds later. He resurveyed the setup of the narrow space, but the coordination between his neck and body was stiff, like a rusted machine. It seemed as if he was exhausted, that the last bit of his battery could be drained at any time to leave him stuck here for eternity. But Luo Nan was ultimately able to control his body. He supported himself against the inner tree wall and slowly walked down the stairs. He was in a trance. It was as if he was sleepwalking. At first Xie Junping wanted to catch up with Luo Nan, but he stopped after thinking things through. He continued to operate his wristband, searching within the Order Club's database. And sure enough, he retrieved some new information. Bu Qingwen graduated in the year 72 with a PhD in architecture, a veteran member of the Order Club. A digital photograph of her earlier years clearly revealed the pretty nature of a lady. It matched with the layout of the treehouse quite well. Perhaps it was the strong first impression, but all Xie Junping felt was that this lady's facial features were somewhat similar to Luo Nan's. His mind was 70–80% certain of this. Right when he was pondering whether or not to make the next step in verifying this, his wristband notified him of an incoming call. Xie Junping ground his teeth when he saw the incoming number and put the call through. He really wanted to speak out with large curses, but he forcefully stuffed his anger back down his throat and into his stomach when he thought of Luo Nan downstairs. He walked cautiously and solemnly next to the viewing window before speaking in a low voice. "Husseina, you nearly killed me, you mother of asterisk seeker. You're still talking. You said that the defense system was some dogsh asterisk T-toy, MMM. A new investor, you sure? He's come for a tour right now." Xie Junping was a bit surprised, and he was finally able to control his mood. He pondered for a moment before giving Husseina a few instructions. In the end, he still warned him seriously. "Remember this. I'll smash your family to kingdom come if there's another situation." When things ended, Xie Junping made his way down softly and quietly. He reached out with a probing head from the staircase to take a look. He didn't dare to turn on his light. The dusky darkness of the tree hole differed only slightly with the light of the sky, and he could barely make out Luo Nan standing in the center of the resting room. If Luo Nan were to slightly stretch out his hands, he would be able to touch the four sides of the wall. Somehow, Luo Nan maintained this nearly touching, yet not touching stiff posture. It was as if he wanted to embrace some incorporeal shadow in the darkness. In the end, Luo Nan's figure slowly slumped down gradually to be submerged within the darkness. Only the slight trembling of his back, which was like a boat that could flip and capsize at any moment, could be faintly discerned. Xie Junping felt that it wasn't proper to continue looking on. Softly and quietly, he made his way back up to burn some time in front of the viewing window. The color of the sky grew all the more darker as time passed. He thought about the information provided by Husseina, and he inevitably found it problematic. The sounds of footsteps echoed right when Xie Junping was at a loss. Luo Nan emerged at the head of the stairs, the dusky light preventing his face from being clearly seen. Xie Junping was just about to open his mouth with delight, but he discovered that Luo Nan wasn't casting any attention towards him at all. Luo Nan remained like a zombie. He walked in front of the unfolded table and hesitated slightly before finally extending his arm across. He picked up the base of the disc and was dazed once more. Wait a bit, man. Xie Junping's breathing slowed. He just wished that Luo Nan would recover back to normal as soon as possible. Senior, let me trouble you with something. The sudden voice startled Xie Junping. Frankly speaking, he still wasn't too used to Luo Nan's soft manner of speaking. Moreover, Luo Nan's voice was a bit hoarse and nasally. It couldn't be that Luo Nan had been crying. A subtle misalignment appeared between the Luo Nan before his eyes and the impression within his memories. Xie Junping was a bit mentally shocked, but the fact that Luo Nan had started the conversation on his own accord was a good thing. Xie Junping went, "Oh," twice before he rushed to respond. Speak up, speak up. I've already submitted my entrance application for the Order Club, so let me trouble Senior to give the approval." "Oh sure, no problem." This was none other than the original purpose, which Xie Junping had dragged Luo Nan over here for. Preparations were naturally made ready well beforehand. "Junior, right now you're a newly entered member of the Order Club. There are now 13 members total in the club, including you. Of course, you can just ignore the other people. They were dealt disciplinary action and have been suspended from the school at the very least. There's just some formal requirements you need to fulfill. Just spend a bit of effort over the next 2 days. I'll run the whole thing over with you, and things will be fine." He operated his wristband as he spoke, but he felt something was off towards the end. He raised his head suddenly and saw Luo Nan facing him with a 90-degree bow. The shock nearly caused Xie Junping to fall out of the window. He rushed to support Luo Nan up. "Oh man, what the heck, Junior Nan?" Luo Nan looked straight at Xie Junping's face and spoke softly. "Today Senior has taken the initiative to have me enter the society. It's only because of this that I've received this chance to find out that my mother had created this work gear during her lifetime. I was even able to see her former residence." Xie Junping felt a bit awkward. This is just a coincidence. It really isn't. My mother sadly died when I was born. My grandpa went crazy before that, and my father went far away. His family really didn't know much about my mother. So today I've found out more about my mother than the past 16 years combined. No matter what intentions Senior had beforehand, I, Luo Nan, will never forget these deep sentiments." Although Luo Nan sputtered these words, his words were truly heavy and weren't false at all. Xie Junping really couldn't stand this proper and solemn attitude of Luo Nan's, and he felt that Luo Nan's current mental state was far too abnormal. He pondered for a long time before finally asking cautiously and solemnly, "She's really your mother?" Luo Nan nodded slightly, and he gave some electric charge to the projector through an unknown method. Now the projector could be started as normal, and the lively picture of a woman was displayed. She seemed to be under the trunk of this very tree, back before the water levels of the marshlands had flooded the sandbar. She was dressed casually and was leaning lightly against the withered tree. She was facing towards the camera with a splendid and bright smile that was far more lively and animated than the picture in her records. She possessed a special air of confidence. Xie Junping thought about how such a talented and good-looking woman had suffered an early death, and it left quite a bad taste in his heart. He really didn't know what to say for a time and could only try comforting Luo Nan. "Your mother passed too early, not leaving many things behind. Junior, you've discovered this legacy of hers. This is a big and good thing. You should be happy." And only at this moment did Xie Junping suddenly remember that the Luo Nan before him was only a 16-year-old boy. Peeling away his cold and hard shell would reveal nothing more than a bruised and scar-riddled heart from a broken family, a husk whose father left him and whose mother died. Yeah, this was way too heartbreaking, but Xie Junping really didn't like this feeling, especially when he saw Luo Nan's circumstances. He absolutely wouldn't leave things like this tonight. This wouldn't do. Xie Junping spoke with frustration and tried to engage with Luo Nan in a conversation. "Junior Nan, we have a problem right now." Before there was mainly the Construction Society and the Mystic Arts Research Society duking it out like dragons fighting for treasure. However, a new investor suddenly appeared who wants to take immediate action with gear. He wants to come over and take a look today. "I've already entered the society. Can he kick me out?" "Hick, things won't go that far." "Then it's fine." It was quite clear that Luo Nan's state of mind was completely enveloped with memorial sentiments of his mother right now. He no longer cared about any other news at all, and this included the inner matters of the Mystic Arts Research Society. Xie Junping suddenly felt exhausted. "Weren't you the one who was doing all the decision-making before?" For some inexplicable reason, it was now Xie Junping's turn to rack his brain with all his might. To fix things before things turned worse, he reminded Luo Nan to pay attention. "The problem is that there's only one way out of this place. Let's not get blocked up here by those people, okay?" Chapter 31, Lying Low Part. Luo Nan was dazed to his core upon hearing Xie Junping's words, but he ultimately was able to understand the most crucial issue. He looked around the treehouse and was silent for some several seconds. In the end, he made a decision. "First, let's head back." Luo Nan looked at the album projector within his hand and hesitated for a long time. However, he still placed it back to its original position to avoid destroying the original arrangements of the treehouse. Then he closed the bionic tree bark over the window to make sure no one would discover this place. After Luo Nan did all of this, he turned his vision to face Xie Junping. Xie Junping then immediately raised his hand to swear, "I absolutely won't mention this tree house to outsiders. This matter will rot in my stomach." Luo Nan did not say a word and instead just bowed once again. Luo Nan was displaying a more respectful attitude ever since his last solemn expression of thanks towards Xie Junping. Honestly speaking, this really made Xie Junping feel secretly refreshed deep inside. Now that they were done with everything here, Luo Nan took the lead going down, and Xie Junping followed behind. Perhaps it was due to his brisk mood, but Xie Junping had an idea inexplicably pop up in his mind. He used his heightened boldness to prod Luo Nan in the shoulder. "Junior Nan, if you don't mind, is it okay if I leave behind a webcam?" Huh? Luo Nan suddenly turned his head and stared at Xie Junping's face. His behavior was just this bizarre. Before, Xie Junping would have certainly been nervous if something like this happened, so much so that he wouldn't have been able to speak out all his words. But his boldness increased accordingly after he could sense Luo Nan's respect for him. His line of thought increased in clarity under Luo Nan's steady gaze. "This is what I'm saying. Don't you feel that this place is bit too clean, Junior Nan? There are lots of mosquitoes in the marshlands, and there is high humidity. A few days without cleaning would make this place unbecoming. Just look at this place. So clean, so refreshing. Yeah, this place looks good, but I'm scared that." Luo Nan didn't blink at all. He spoke with a hoarse voice and completed Xie Junping's thoughts. "People have already discovered this place, and they've lived here for a long time. Cough, that's what I'm saying. After all, the AI cleaning system of gear most likely wouldn't cover up to here." Luo Nan didn't speak any further, and his thoughtful gaze drifted a bit. It was unknown what he was thinking of. Several seconds passed before he turned around and walked slowly down. His finger was pasted to the inner tree wall the entire time, all the way until they walked to the stone steps where they started from. Then he suddenly spoke. "It's here. There used to be a door here, but right now it's been padded with bionic material. It's sealed dead tight." Xie Junping aimed his illuminating light on top. He observed for a moment and spoke in favor. It might have been an ordinary door left behind from the days when the sandbar still existed. Then the water levels rose, and it was discarded. Rising water levels. Luo Nan's voice grew hoarser and hoarser, as if a blade was cutting across his throat. Speaking was growing more and more difficult. When did the water level rise? Xie Junping looked up the information online. Approximately in the year 87. The underground rock fractured at that time, diverting the route of some underground river. It increased the average water level of the wetlands by nearly half a meter. The lake area of withered tree sandbar increased by a full 1.7 meters. Hick, the year 87. Yeah, didn't Qingwen's death due to a difficult childbirth occur in the year 80? In any case, it was impossible for her to come and remodel this tree's space 7 years later. His line of thought straightened, and Xie Junping whistled. There really was someone. Yes, there really was someone, but who was it? Luo Nan responded hoarsely and slowly stooped down. He touched the narrow and secret passageway that had clearly been cut in at a later time. Xie Junping woke up with a realization and came over. There was a 99% chance that this passageway was carved out at the same time as sealing the door. They both had the same purpose of avoiding the rising water levels to still allow entry and exit. And so, the differences between Qingwen's initial designs and the current layout could be explained. Xie Junping watched Luo Nan, who was stooped over and seemingly mulling over the structure of the hidden passageway. He casted his beam of light over to make it easier for Luo Nan to investigate. But he suddenly realized something was wrong after the light went over. Luo Nan was certainly deep in thought right now, but he was unconsciously digging with his fingers at the border between the hidden passageway and the tree hole. This monotonous movement could be said to be a bad habit, but it would be better to say that it was an indicator of some extreme mood. Luo Nan was heavy and emotional a moment ago, yet he would be occasionally tranquil, like the undulating night tides of the coastal waters. This was the cadence corresponding with his ordinary mood. But he was in a repressed and irritable mood at this very moment. It was as if he was a wounded beast that saw the enemy that wounded it intrude on its territory. He was overbrimming with so much rashness that his mood was savage. Xie Junping was really scared that Luo Nan would tear off his fingernails. He rocked his illuminating beam of light very carefully. The variations in lighting caused Luo Nan to be startled awake. He suddenly turned around. Xie Junping was shockingly met with the red, bloodshot eyes of Luo Nan. They weren't seeped with tears. Instead, they were heaped with a madness that pointed to the desire to devour a chosen person. Xie Junping just felt his calf muscle cramp when he was faced with this situation. He unconsciously moved a step back. But Luo Nan's mood seemed to be pacified by being under the illumination of light. He ceased his monotonous actions that caused one's blood to run cold and spoke in a low voice. "Senior, where did we leave off in our conversation just now? Hick, that there's someone living in this tree who sealed that door and dug out this secret passageway that leads to the laboratory." Luo Nan shook his head. At first glance, the underwater corridor is normally a dead-end route. It would be too conspicuous for outsiders to come in that way. Therefore, it can't be any other people. It can only be the inner members of the society or the laboratory. Xie Junping thought about it and felt that Luo Nan was right. He agreed with Luo Nan's reasoning in this way. And thinking deeper, such a person of the Order Club would have to engage in normal activities and social exchanges within the club. And when other people aren't paying attention, they would sneak through this underwater corridor and enter this tree hole to engage in some shady business, which would never see the light of day. The most important thing would be the span of time such a person would be doing this. They would probably have been doing this for 7–8 years, over 10 years, all the way until now. Thinking about it made one's heart run cold. Xie Junping suddenly produced an idea. It can't be. It can't be that the hidden passageway was actually dug in from the other side during its creation. Maybe someone swam and entered through the viewing window. With this thought having been born in his head, he looked at the pitch-black entrance of the hidden passageway. Then he looked at the spiraling flight of stairs behind him. He didn't feel so good now. It seemed that Luo Nan hadn't thought about things this much. He slowly stood back up and faced Xie Junping half up. "Then I'll trouble Senior with the matter of installing the webcam, if there's someone. If there's still someone here. I want to see who this person is to the end." A bit of nervousness sprouted in Xie Junping's heart, but having Luo Nan at his side was more or less a source of comfort. He took a deep breath. "All right, I'll install it right now. And you have tools at the ready." "Hick, I brought a few." Xie Junping felt a bit awkward, but he still retrieved 2 micro webcams, which were only the size of grains of rice, out from his wristband. Rich kids like him would sometimes play some absurd tricks, and they relied on these devices to do so. These types of portable micro machines could not be simpler to install. All he had to do was find a location with a wide viewing angle and press down to have it stick. It wouldn't fall easily. Xie Junping used both webcams. This small toy can broadcast video in real time, and a single webcam can operate for over 3 months. Looking at how clean this place is, We can get a result in 1 or 2 days if we're lucky. Luo Nan walked up and down the entire space of the tree hole once again while Xie Junping was working, but he was unable to discover any more clues. His mood was clearly far more stifled now. Without saying a word, he went ahead through the hidden passageway and entered the underwater corridor. Xie Junping carefully caught up to Luo Nan while having the monitoring video open the entire time. He was scared that a murderer, one who had been hiding for several years, would suddenly jump out behind his back. Chapter 31, Lying Low Part 2-2. Xie Junping raised his head after jumping from the exit of the hidden passageway. The camouflage film looked like a whole metal plate, blocking his line of sight perfectly. Who would ever expect there to be a short and narrow hidden passageway with the peculiar space of a tree hole right behind it? Luo Nan did not utter a word, maintaining silence during their return trip. Xie Junping gave another glance at the monitoring video and caught up using 2 urgent steps. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Luo Nan, but he soon found himself regretting his decision. Each of the system modules of the laboratory had recovered back to normal operation right now. The way back was no longer a pitch-black darkness. Unique black light illuminated with a dark purple glow within the glass walls. It made the watery area turn phantasmal and dreamlike. But this long and tedious road was simply torture from Xie Junping's perspective. The mental state of Luo Nan next to him was abnormal after all. During the journey, Luo Nan continued to stifle his state of mania from the tree hole, his thoughts spinning in endless circles the entire time. Sometimes he would suddenly stop his footsteps, turn his head, and look back down the long corridor. Sometimes he would look at the increasingly gloomy waters next to him, and was lost in thought for a long time. The blood within his eyes glistened with vividness each time he did this, causing it hard to look at his eyes directly. And there was even a few times when Xie Junping could hear the low sound of teeth grinding. So several minutes passed while moving in this walk-and-stop manner, causing Xie Junping to confirm all the more that Luo Nan was going mad. He had no doubts whatsoever. If there was some person who dared to say, "I am the one who has been living in this tree," Luo Nan would immediately throw himself over, crush that person's throat with his teeth, and then roar in interrogation. "What the hell do you damn think you're doing here?" What was he thinking? If he continued thinking like this, Xie Junping felt that he too would go mad. He had to do something at least. Xie Junping racked his brain as he recalled back to a few communications courses he had taken. He framed his words and hesitated for a long time before opening his mouth. "Hick, Junior, you don't know much information about Auntie, your mother, right?" Luo Nan was clearly stunned. His defenses had been broken into, and the force that did it came from his thoughts of affection for his mother. These wonderful feelings were like a gushing river that cleansed his heart. It was a bit painful, but it wasn't bad. A long time passed. Only then did Luo Nan nod. "No, not much." "There's a way." Delight filled Xie Junping's heart. He rushed persistently. "Auntie didn't have many relatives." Luo Nan continued to respond. "My mom was a war orphan. She grew up in an orphanage since she was small." Xie Junping nearly choked, but thinking of the time period, Qingwen certainly was born during the Third War. There were many people of that generation with similar circumstances. Regardless of how it happened, at least a conversation was started with Luo Nan. "Was she a local? If, Junior, you want to collect more information, I still have some capabilities in Xie City." Xie Junping took complete charge with quite decent results. Luo Nan faced him with a half bow. Thank you, Senior. Here we go again. He felt that Luo Nan was just like a person from the previous century, or perhaps he was following procedures completely by the book to perform his actions. That might be it. Xie Junping's speech, until now, was filled with sufficient confidence in this conversation. He gestured with his hands. In fact, I really admire Auntie to be able to design gear and still have people scratching their heads over it 20 years later. I just assumed it was a masterpiece from an expert master. This is also my first time I knew about this. Then, Junior, what sort of things did you know before? Your family hasn't mentioned a single thing about Auntie. The sudden silence made Xie Junping nearly believe he had overreached himself, like he had tried to be clever and ended up with an egg on his face. But Luo Nan still opened his mouth in the end. My mom passed before I was born. You said that before. Wait. Didn't those words sound a little bit strange? Before Xie Junping could realize what was wrong, he heard Luo Nan speak again. My mother and him, they got to know each other at Acumen College. They also went to the wilderness together to join with Grandpa. My auntie had a really messy relationship with them. She doesn't know much at all. Luo Nan's words were somewhat incoherent, and they also contained some subtle implications. Xie Junping combined this with his previously collected information, and he finally came to an understanding. Luo Nan's parents probably got to know each other and fell in love when they attended Acumen College. Then later, they went to the wilderness together to assist Luo Nan's grandpa with his research. Luo Nan's current guardian was his aunt, but she didn't have a good relationship with his main family. She didn't know much pertaining to the situation. Under the circumstances where his grandfather went crazy and his father went missing, naturally, it was hard for Luo Nan to receive relevant information about his mother. Luo Nan unconsciously extended his hand as he spoke. His fingertips touched the glass wall to produce the muted sound of friction. I only know one thing about my mom since I was little. She had already passed before I was born. It was this sentence again, and the same bizarre feeling emerged once more. Xie Junping mulled the words twice over before finally realizing where the issue lay. If she had already died, how could she give birth to a child? He had heard something like this before. In the relatively backwards medical circumstances at the time, for the case of a difficult childbirth, it was still possible to save the child even if the mother had already passed. Did this happen to Luo Nan, more or less? Xie Junping felt that he had figured out this secret and was just about to continue the subject. But then he saw Luo Nan take out that fluorescent pen from his black leather notebook and draw an object shaped like an oval. Next to it sat the silhouette of a skinny character. The lines of the drawing were simple to the extreme, conveying the content extremely openly and clearly. This is my mom. Luo Nan's voice was exceptionally gentle. I've never seen her with my own eyes, but I've heard that she gave birth to me in this way. Xie Junping was a bit bewildered. Apparently it was June of the year 80 when I was 7 months, inside Mom's stomach. The base went into disorder and Mother was heavily injured. She sealed off the laboratory room and used a sustainment pod to save me. Look, this is me. Luo Nan had drawn a small circle within the oval, within the middle of the sustainment pod. Xie Junping opened his lips, yet not a sound was uttered from them. He originally wanted to ask how a fetus within a stomach could be placed within a sustainment pod. But when these words came to his lips, he suddenly comprehended the bitter course of events and instantly stood there in shock. Luo Nan pressed lightly against the edge of the silhouette and spoke in the same gentle but fear-inducing manner. I can't see her, but she's always here. This is my mother. Xie Junping looked at the fluorescent lines dull-wittedly. He didn't know how he should respond for a time. Luo Nan walked forward, swapping to a different area and drawing out another few lines. He borrowed the illumination of the lamps of black light to form a sheet of depressing shadow. In front of the shadow was the prison-like structure of a fence. A person sat within it, and the small shadow of another person was besides it. Then 3 years later, my grandfather was prosecuted, imprisoned, and he went mad. The laboratory data was no more, as well as the results of his research. And at this time, someone else was no more as well. Luo Nan gave an odd laugh to Xie Junping. He should be here, but he's not here. This is my father. They just happened to walk to the starting location of the underwater corridor at this time. Luo Nan retrieved his fluorescent pen and faced Xie Junping with a bow once again. I've said some boring words just now. I've bothered Senior. Luo Nan had clearly understood Xie Junping's intentions. Conversely, Xie Junping had finally pried a crack into the twisted, heavy, and melancholic inner world of Luo Nan's heart. Furthermore, Luo Nan's mood had clearly become much more tranquil. This should count as a good deed, right? Xie Junping secretly hushed out a breath and was just about to respond when the sounds of voices came from not too far away. 7-8 people came into the underwater corridor from the surrounding resting area. There was even someone who greeted Xie Junping. Bro Ping, we've arrived. Chapter 32, Discussing a Legacy Part. Xie Junping frowned as he looked over. Hu Huiying, aka Husseina, of the student council was of the people who came. He counted as his die-hard ally, and the person whom Husseina greeted was none other than Xie Junping. Aside from these two, there were 2 new faces and another 4 people. The upper members of the construction society and even the chairman, Lang Ding, had come over. When faced with this situation, Xie Junping suddenly felt a bit of an ominous premonition. Although he felt apprehension in his heart, Xie Junping still adopted a smiling and welcoming expression. This sort of communications work was precisely his expertise. Since he wasn't facing Luo Nan, that old geezer, he immediately felt the heavens and earth open up wide. He just did whatever he pleased. He went from the difficulties of the infernals of hell to the starting arena for newbies. Though he faced 7 people, he was still able to greet with the amiable cordialness of a host without messing up at all. He also cleared up the identity of the 2 new faces in passing. A lawyer, Xing Zhu, was the representative of the investor. His temperament was calm and flat, in accordance to the cold and aloft behavior of the society elite. Another was a bodyguard, Hai Lianpi. He had a swift and fierce build, looking like a rather cool professional. No one would ignore him. These 2 were already working hard in public society to make a living. They were older than the students present here by a huge gap. Reasonably speaking, in these circumstances, it would best for the Society Operations Office to send out people of equivalent status to receive these 2, or perhaps send out a teacher advisor from the relevant society to meet them. But Xie Junping did not see such a person. Xie Junping was finding this all the more fishy, and soon his premonition became true. While during the exchange with lawyer He Zhu spoke directly. The Rainbow Fund is more than satisfied with the growth plan and personnel composition of the construction society. They are willing to launch more practical collaborations. It's quite the decent investment to inject capital into the iconic building of the Northern Bank. I hope we can meet an agreement with the school and the student council pertaining to planning the course of events." Xie Junping gave a chuckle, but he was cursing Husseina 1,000,000 times in his heart. "You didn't describe the matter clearly. Sure, it's true that an investor had arrived, but he's not directly entering the game or something. The investor's starting a new path, and it's for the aid of the construction society. Oh man, he originally thought that it was going to change between a meeting of two dragons to a war between three kingdoms. But now, the situation looked clearly to be a one-sided advantage." He grinned while shaking hands with Lang Ding, and he diverted the conversation. "I won't mention anything else, but I have no choice but to be impressed with the matter of pulling a sponsor to the construction society. This chairman of this large society, Lang Ding, wasn't an especially strong person. He only laughed at this moment. It's all right. Pulling in a new investor will make the allocation of society funds more fair. The schedule is now much more laxed. I wish you the best." Xie Junping laughed with delight, but his heart was screeching. There's trouble now. He turned his head to glance an eye at Luo Nan. This old geezer still had the look of having a gloomy mood, paying no attention at all to these uninvited people. Indeed, by following Luo Nan's logic, all Luo Nan needed was to be in the Order Club, to be in the building designed by his mother. It didn't matter who ended up controlling this place at all. My God, how could a situation ever be so simple? Xie Junping cursed silently. He felt that he had quite the headache. The construction society was okay too. Forget about the Mystic Arts Research Society. There's not a single one of the large societies that was easy to deal with. His planned work was now impossible. A small member of a society had the ability to disrupt one's plans. Before, Xie Junping was confident to give a guarantee to Luo Nan. This was because he had contacted the Mystic Arts Research Society beforehand. The path behind and ahead had been totally great. But now this matter with the construction society was really hard to deal with. It was relatively easy to speak to Ling Dang, but this matter with the society was far more complicated. There were many thorns in the executing committee. Regardless of other things, Li Zhucheng, this dying dog, acted as the daily vice-chairman of the construction society. He possessed great influence within the society. If Luo Nan were to truly enter the construction society and bump into Li Zhucheng once more, wouldn't there be a case of a mysterious campus death? He had to head back and think of a plan. Xie Junping never had the intention to stay behind during his entire exchange. He exchanged a few more rubbish words and pulled Luo Nan to leave. But he never expected that Lawyer Zhu of the Rainbow Fund would freeze him in place with a shout after just walking few steps. "Head Xie, there's some business I need to discuss with you." While it's true that Xie Junping was the head of the Society Activities Department of the Student Council, only a few people directly addressed him by this title within the school. He turned his head stunned and adopted a smile. "If you have any business to talk about, don't hesitate, Lawyer Zhu." Lawyer Zhu nodded slightly. "It pertains to the aspect regarding societal assets. At present glance, the Order Club has already entered a state of empty operations. The completion of all processes will take at least 3 months to half a year. It would be disadvantageous to protect the existing assets at this time. So we propose to hold a negotiations meeting to communicate with the competing societies and formally count up and sequester all assets of the Order Club. This will lessen depreciation and prevent external consumption. I hope the student council can coordinate and organize this as the middleman and complete the relevant procedures as soon as possible. Xie Junping's eyebrows was a knot. If you sequester the society, where would this old geezer next to me go? Lawyer Zhu didn't wait for a response and continued. In addition, we also hope that the school will do a strict investigation. We were paying close attention to the Order Club's website recently, and we discovered that a new person had actually been admitted to the society. Can the society still recruit people even when it's halted? For someone to enter the society during the competition over its resources, we need to understand the cause of this. Oh crap, this guy specialized in finding faults. Xie Junping's face darkened in an instant, but he found things odd at the same time. He didn't remember offending the Rainbow Fund in any place of his plan. Perhaps it was this Mr. Zhu's litigating instincts. The Rainbow Fund was a very famous investor fund of Xie City. Logically speaking, they need to be this cheap, right? He sent another glance to Luo Nan at his side. The latter had clearly heard Lawyer Zhu's speech and had already lifted his head, but his line of sight wasn't casted on the person who had spoken. It dropped next to the lawyer, on that bodyguard with a dark complexion. It was strange. Although Xie Junping did not understand what was the matter, he wouldn't leave things undone when it came to things. He smiled a fake smile in response. Lawyer Zhu probably didn't know that the Order Club still hasn't been dissolved in accordance to school procedures. The new member was recruited with the student council as the escrow agent. The member's main function is to maintain the normal operations of the society. To recruit such a member is within the realm of reason, right? Lawyer Zhu laughed faintly. All original members of the society have entered detainment procedures. I find it hard to believe that the society is capable of resuming normal operations. Otherwise, the school wouldn't launch the activities of bidding over its assets and act as the escrow agent. Our reasoning is as such. An escrow agent's purpose is to fully realize the protection of the assets, especially in this situation where the society is substantially dying. If Head Xie believes that there's a flaw in our reasoning, we can hold a negotiations meeting, solicit the opinions of the highest bidders, and choose the highest common denominator. Xie Junping choked slightly. He really didn't have the guts to open that negotiations meeting. Lawyer Zhu's line of sight transferred over to Luo Nan's face. Then, at lightning speeds, he exchanged a meaningful glance to the dark-complexioned bodyguard next to him. After the latter gave a faint nod, he spoke. "Are you Luo Nan, the student who just entered the society? I just saw your name in the announcement post on the society's website. Let me take the liberty of asking a question. What's the reason you entered the society? Have you gone through the relevant examinations? Before entering the society, did you understand the situation with the Order Club?" Luo Nan hugged his notebook when faced with these interrogating words. He was cold, detached, and quiet, uttering not a word. In the end, Xie Junping couldn't stand watching this. He shouted, "Hey, hey, hey, that's 3 questions. If you want reasons, just ask me, who would know more than me." Chapter 32, Discussing a Legacy, Part 2-2. Xie Junping took the focus of this argument and diverted it onto himself. But in retrospect, perhaps he had saved Lawyer Zhu's fate. He felt the superiority of occupying a higher ground. "Lawyer Zhu, you're saying that the recruiting a new member for the continued operations of the Order Club is a waste of resources. I do not believe this is so. Do you believe we, of the student council, eat swine food, that we don't know what we're doing? Hu San. The ability to recruit new members by the Order Club was reinstated recently in the new semester right. Hu Huying had suddenly become a bit confused from these arguments, and Xie Junping had already pulled him into the water. Luckily, the many years of being allies were not for naught. He immediately nodded. It was reinstated on September 1st. Xie Junping was fully aware that this was a behavior from the lagging execution of procedures, yet he used this as evidence, throwing it onto Lawyer Zhu's face. Perhaps Lawyer Xie Chu doesn't understand the inner workings of the school. If so, there's no harm in me telling you. The Order Club truly did cause themselves to fall into ruin over these past few years. There's more than the financial affairs situation from last year. An experimental accident occurred in the year 93, which caused their qualifications to recruit members be removed. But it was none other than this qualification that was reinstated on September 1st of this year. What does this mean? This means that the school still hopes to give the Order Club another opportunity to let this old society, which existed back when the school was founded, leave behind some trace of existence. Even if they aren't able to escape their fate, this doesn't mean they will completely disappear. At least there will be a legacy. His speech started as words that even he wasn't confident in, but Xie Junping grew more spirited the more he talked. Even he felt a bit moved. This was because he had thought of Bu Qingwen at this very moment. He thought about how this talented alumni had designed gear all by herself, left behind a classical work of art, traveled to the distant wilderness, and then died in that sort of moving and tragic fashion. This former society had possessed great people such as her. They had to leave behind something to let people remember. This sort of thing was exactly what he was going for. And so Xie Junping's voice grew all the more resounding. A prospective member has applied, and the society has approved. Isn't this very normal? I looked and saw the true passion contained within this student's submission. The grounds are sufficient, and the applicant himself is extremely outstanding. What would it matter to allow such a person to enter the society during escrow? Lawyer Zhu had seen several displays of emotions overwhelming logic such as this. Young people really love to act this way. He shook his head with a smile. The grounds are sufficient, then can you give concrete details? If it was before, Xie Junping might have been embarrassed, but today he was very different. He laughed out loud. Of course they're sufficient, they're super adequate. He directly pulled up the design plans from the society's database and had it revealed to everyone's eyes through the nearby projection installations. Gear Aka, this building we are in right now, is the child of a doctorate who graduated in the year 72 from the school's architectural design institution. Mrs. Bu Qingwen designed and planned this building all by herself until it was completed at last. Here are the relevant digital records. They include Mrs. Bu's personal signature. There are no problems, right? Lawyer Zhu. Lawyer Zhu felt that something was not quite right. He retracted his smiling expression and looked at the records with a frown. On the contrary, the dark-complexioned bodyguard gave a cold stare next to him, making Xie Junping's mind have a thought break out. This older brother doesn't seem to be a bodyguard. He seems more like a mobster holding some firepower. Anyway, Xie Junping pushed these unprecedented feelings and raised his spirits quickly. With a bold, uplifted head, he said, Mrs. Bu Qingwen is our school's pride, just based off of this masterwork gear. But it was such a pity. Those whom the heavens love die young. Mrs. Bu unfortunately passed away 6 years after completing this work. The personnel of Gear were changed afterwards, and there were none who remembered this shocking but short-lived alumni from back in the day. It was only until today. Xie Junping walked with large strides until he stood next to Luo Nan. He grasped Luo Nan by the shoulders. It was only until today that Mrs. Bu's sole and only child, student Luo Nan, had tracked down the vestiges of his mother and entered Acumen College for study. Through a month of pursuit, he found his mother's work of art, yet he witnessed the Order Club in decline and Gear unprotected. The pain was too much, and he took the initiative to request entrance to the society, to devote all his strength to take this legendary building and have it shine with luster anew. Are these grounds not sufficient? Luo Nan shot a glance to the hand residing on his shoulder, not saying anything in the end. The difficult people didn't voice any objections, and Xie Junping's imposing air increased like the floating of a boat when the tide rises. Junior Lang, Lawyer Zhu. While we do know that the Order Club is likely to become history, this Mrs. Bu has performed a great contribution to the school. The school should back and encourage the cost of supporting Luo Nan honoring his mother. This is just my individual opinion, but I place these words in front of you. If you have any objections, you can voice your suspicions. A lawsuit is not a problem as well. Sue the student council, sue the alumni association, sue the parents association, sue the school administration office, sue the board of directors. No matter what, I will use this as my argument. What is fake cannot be made true. What is true cannot be made fake. I want to see who's able to sever the connection of flesh and blood between Mrs. Bu and Junior Luo Nan. Who's able to smash their love between mother and child. Who's able to take the cultural legacy of our school and stomp it on the ground in destruction. Xie Junping's current imposing air could truly topple the mountains and overturn the seas. He glared with wide eyes and pointed to someone irrelevant, Junior Lang. Lang Ding forced a smile and waved his hand. He wasn't willing to contend with Xie Junping. Xie Junping looked once more at the person who talked the most, Lawyer Zhu. Lawyer Zhu's face was a bit green, and he didn't respond immediately. He seemed to be formulating his words. No way would Xie Junping give Zhu this chance. His mind flowed freely and rapidly right now. He displayed not a word, only laughing in the end. He held Luo Nan by the shoulder and swaggered off. An unprecedented and decisive victory. Xie Junping's eyes were practically brimming with tears of excitement before even walking a few steps. This was the first time he didn't use a teleprompter, didn't use internal earbuds to make a fervorous speech okay. The results were simply invigorating to the point of ecstasy. So pitiful, it was so pitiful that this wasn't recorded. He wouldn't be able to resample this event in the future. Wait up. Maybe there was a way. The idea was already born, so Xie Junping turned his head to ask, Junior Nan, my man, my form just now, can you draw it for me? Hick, I'm sorry. His mood had been quite exciteful, so he was neglectful. Xie Junping only just discovered that he was still holding onto Luo Nan's shoulder, and had yet to let go. A single cold and threatening glance from this old geezer caused Xie Junping's neck to contract. He rushed to remove his hand. Contrary to all expectations, Luo Nan gave him a huge thumbs up in the very next moment. Senior, you're very eloquent. Xie Junping coughed and spoke with reserved intentions. I've met many litigators like him, and I got my confidence from Auntie and Junior Nan. But he couldn't help himself in the end. He broke into a great smile and spoke like a chatterbox. Say, Luo Nan, just draw one for me. It would be quite the pity to not leave behind a commemoration. Luo Nan actually didn't refuse. He just responded, "First I'm going to buy a flexible screen." Xie Junping never expected Luo Nan to respond, but he had suddenly obtained this reply. He was exalted after a moment of shock. Actually, a portrait really wasn't much, but this represented that the relationship between him and Luo Nan had truly entered into a new stage. He immediately smacked his chest. "I'll pay for it." No need, thanks though." Luo Nan gave a laugh, but he soon collected himself. He lowered his head and flipped through his notebook until he reached the page with the flexible screen to look at the broken side of the screen. He opened the metal binding rings a moment later, took out the flexible e-ink screen, weighed it in his hand, and adopted a pitching posture. Xie Junping ate some shock next to him. Before he could exert strength to restrain Luo Nan's throwing arm, Luo Nan stopped himself and faced Xie Junping with laughter. "It's bad to damage one's health, right?" No matter what sort of craze Luo Nan was going through, Xie Junping just nodded his head resolutely. He knew fully well how Li Zucheng had turned into a dying dog in the end. And so, he was able to infer the importance Luo Nan placed on this flexible e-ink screen. It was inevitable that he was worried about Luo Nan's current mood, that Luo Nan would do something he would regret in the future. If Luo Nan could come to by himself, well, that would naturally be the best outcome. Luo Nan muttered to himself deeply for a while. In the end, he put the flexible e-ink screen back in the notebook and continued walking ahead. It was as if nothing had happened at all. Chapter 33, Rushing Back Part. Xie Junping's luxury car was rushing down the high-speed magnetic rail. His Phantom had been collected, but for a rich kid like him, this was nothing more than a chance to show off the car collection from his garage. Looking out of the car window, one could see that Xie City had already entered into the color of night. Now was the peak of when people got off of work, but traffic was rarely seen in Xie City. Through the course of dozens of years, through hundreds of millions of tons of earth, steel, and other various extraordinary materials, through the determination of the human race, a large collection of magnificent metropolises were built. Over 200 million people were crammed into this finite land. But high-efficiency operation was still just as possible as before. Just for traffic alone, Xie City discharged 20 floors of traffic from the subterranean to the high-altitude skies. Over 1 million calculated means of transportation of all kinds were divided and flowed. Even during the period of the greatest concentration of traffic, only approximately 20 minutes were needed to rush down a 40-kilometer road. Xie Junping had offered to send Luo Nan back home, and so Luo Nan was cheerfully relaxed right now. He took this bit of time to get familiar with the new flexible e-ink screen he had just purchased. He was mainly getting familiar with the feel between the screen and his pen. The other devices for configuration were absolutely meaningless. All he had to do was integrate the external receiving neuron and connect it to the battery module. Then the familiar interface of 5 years would appear in front of him once again. However, the icon of gear, which had existed within the laboratory, already disappeared. This showed that the external neuron was absolutely influenced by the underlying software and hardware. Luo Nan's finger rubbed twice against the location where the gear icon once was. Then he immediately opened the drawing software, which he hadn't used for a while. The picture of the burning wraith was still placed on the uppermost layer of the software interface, looking just as malevolent and terrifying as before. Having been enriched by the concise abstract lines of the wraith sign, Luo Nan just felt that this sketch was truly an eyesore. There were so many things bad, wrong, and twisted about it. He shook his head and directly deleted the demonic sketch. The earlier drawn sketch of the nightclub entrance was naturally substituted. Hey, 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 delete this one too, switch to a better-looking one. Xie Junping had turned his head over to look right at this time. He saw that Luo Nan had just deleted a sketch, but he wasn't able to see the details of it clearly. However, the next image could not be clearer. He had blurted noisily on the spot. Luo Nan gave him a glance. He spoke not coldly, but not warmly. Pay attention to driving. We're on the high-speed, magnetic rails now. How can I drive? Xie Junping placed his hand on the steering wheel and received a warning from the car's AI system. The car first entered into a switching region, before allowing Xie Junping to modify the magnetic course. This was to avoid hitting the cars around them. Xie Junping donned an innocent state. Luo Nan didn't feel like paying attention to him. He made a blank page on the drawing software, and his pen went down on the screen. Xie Junping breathed and drew close to him. He looked at Luo Nan, using the digital pen to draw indistinct background shadows. It was very likely to be the inner layout of gear. Xie Junping was suddenly stunned during this period of excitement. Who is that person, that bodyguard with a dark complexion? Why are you drawing him? I've encountered him before. Luo Nan drew an approximate outline of the dark-complexioned bodyguard. He wanted to add a few fine lines, but there was some hesitation. This was a relatively rare situation. Xie Junping was still a bit unsatisfied. Who is he, man? I saw him yesterday on ship Lanshan. He's probably a burner of Quantum Corporation. Burner? Xie Junping's chin smashed down onto his own shoulder. He should be on the warship at the time. It was none other than the dark-complexioned male who was towing the deep blue Walker exoskeleton armors of Quantum Corporation. He drove across in front of Luo Nan, and the visions of the two intersected. The dark-complexioned male had covered the exoskeleton armors with a tarp to protect them from malevolent eyes. The whole course of events couldn't have been described as pleasant. Xie Junping felt a cold sweat come. Didn't he exchange contending gazes with the dark-complexioned male while he was giving his fervent speech? If that male sent a palm flying over, his just-escalated mouth might fearfully become smashed to pieces. In comparison, Quantum Corporation's military might wasn't that direct. Luo Nan could only shake his head when faced with Xie Junping's expression. He flipped away from this page, and his pen dropped down onto the screen once more. This time, he really drew Xie Junping's form. Although this was clearly a gift, Luo Nan didn't deliberately add strokes. It was still minimalist. Then the clear form of an image appeared. This silhouette had an arm around a person's shoulder and was waving with the other arm in roused spirits. It seemed excited, wrathful, and a bit deranged. But the arm embracing the neck and the shadow to its flank made these somewhat out-of-control movements turn into something defender-like, upright, and unafraid. Xie Junping initially was arguing, saying, "How am I that crazy?" But when he saw the whole composition of the piece, he grew more delighted the more he looked. This lasted until he was grinning from ear to ear, his satisfaction at its peak. In the end, there was only one thing unsatisfactory about it. That's you to the side. Why didn't you draw yourself out? I'm not good at self-portraits. Luo Nan gave a simple response. Then he immediately sent the picture over. He didn't care what Xie Junping would do with this picture. Then next, Luo Nan took these two pictures and his old accumulated pictures and simultaneous selected them. He long pressed the screen for several seconds, and the second layer of the drawing software, aka the true features of the software, were opened. He had tried and failed yesterday in the confinement room of the warship. But today, he had swapped to a new device, and everything went smoothly without a hitch. The bulk of the second layer interface was none other than the tetrahedron on the title page of his grandfather's notebook. However, it lacked the inscribed sphere and the outer scribed sphere. Instead, the tetrahedron was divided by 4 level cuts to form 5 levels of approximately equal height. The tetrahedron rotated within a gray background. Xie Junping's gaze moved across. He was a bit curious. Maslow. This interface looked to be really close to the classical diagram of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This theory listed a person's needs from low to high, from basic needs to complicated needs. They were laid out in 5 layers like a flight of stairs. All one needs was a bit of common sense in sociology and psychology, and one would not find this diagram, corresponding to a classical theory of the previous century, strange. Xie Junping pointed out, from bottom to top, physiological, safety, social, esteem, and self-actualization. Its student, office worker, technician, clergy, and politician. How vulgar! I'm saying that these occupations can be arranged in this increasing order. Luo Nan didn't explain. He just took the dozen or so sketches he had selected and sent them into the confined space of the tetrahedron. There were at least several hundred similar works inside, dispersed and scattered. All the sketches were shrunk in size within the confined space. They began to rummage up and down when the new sketches were entered in. It looked like a fantastical card shuffler. They were shaken repeatedly under the power of the software to be laid out in a new arrangement. The positions of the several hundred works of art were set by the card shuffler machine several seconds later. The overwhelming majority of works were placed in the lower 2 levels. Once in a while, there would be one in the 3rd level. But the 4th and 5th level were completely empty. They can act as a tarot card deck for fortune-telling. Man, what company made this software? Xie Junping was drawn into the fantastical change in the interface. His brain asked questions as he opened his eyes wide. He strived to look for the sketch of himself. It should be my father's work. Xie Junping immediately became sincere. He had a rough feel for Luo Nan's character now. He knew that Luo Nan certainly wouldn't have a good mood when it came to any matters involving Luo Nan's father. Luo Nan was a lot quieter for the rest of the drive. The flying car arrived in Blue Bay Community at approximately 7 o'clock. He had gotten home just a little bit later than normal. He bid farewell with Xie Junping and entered the community. Luo Nan went into the apartment elevator with his head down the entire time. He selected the floor and then opened his notebook once again. He stared at the flexible e-ink screen at the special second layer interface, lost in thought. Then he gave a cold laugh. That coward's existence was displayed clearly here, forever hiding like a turtle withdrawn into its shell. The drawing software was like this. The external receiving neuron was like this. The space within the tree, wasn't it also like this? Luo Nan didn't know the answer to this, but the oil-burning flames of the fervent feeling of pain within his heart could not be clearer. The elevator reached the desired floor, the metal door opened wide, and Luo Nan closed his notebook with a bang to walk out with large strides. The home AI system had detected his existence and had already confirmed his identity. The main door opened. Luo Nan walked in with a step, but was a bit startled. The living room lights were on, revealing a middle-aged woman who was sitting on the sofa and doing work via her wristband. She raised her head when she heard the door open, and her gaze fell directly across, her face expressionless. Chapter 33, Rushing Back, Part 2-2. Luo Nan stood at attention on the spot. Aunt. The middle-aged woman on the sofa was Luo Nan's aunt, Luo Shuqing. Her figure was petite and her looks were average. Her temperament was rather quiet and serious. Luo Nan had his head hanging low the entire time when facing this elder. Aunt, you've come over even though it's so far. Some people won't come to visit no matter how you invite them, so I came to see how you're doing. Mrs. Luo Shuqing's poisonous tongue was just as deadly as before. It immediately stifled Luo Nan from speaking any further. It was only now that he realized it. No wonder he was able to pass through the ordeal peacefully and effortlessly yesterday night. His aunt had probably decided to come over and do a sudden and unannounced investigation. All right, this was just Auntie's style. Luo Shuqing got up while looking at her watch. Come on, your uncle has already finished preparing dinner. She did not give any chance for Luo Nan to disagree. Luo Nan struggled for a bit. There's no need to be this bothersome. Since you know it's bothersome, there's no need to cause further trouble. Luo Shuqing walked to Luo Nan's side. Her slim build was a head shorter than her nephew's, but her imposing air was able to surpass that. How unusual. You're being extremely daring to live in a high-rise apartment and not worry about falling. But your uncle and I are already old. We are scared witless. We hope that you'll come back and take care of the house. Luo Nan opened his mouth, yet he soon discovered that he lacked the strength to argue. He really didn't have the strength. He hadn't closed his eyes to rest for 40 consecutive hours of continuous work. He had faced the burning wraith, burners, and ability users. There were also the external receiving neuron, the secret of gear, and countless information flowing in and bursting. There were also the intense washing of his state of mind, stemming from his mother and from that coward. It seemed that he had overdrafted his entire energy reserves. At this very moment, it was just as if he had completed a very difficult and long army march back home. And so when faced with this vile mouth of good intentions, when faced with this love from his aunt like he were her own child, when faced with one of his rare close relatives who he could relax completely with, did he have a need to protest against her? To waste time in torment? After a moment of Luo Nan being dazed, Luo Shuqing had firmly grabbed onto Luo Nan's shoulder and faced him towards the exit. Time is valuable, everyone, move out. This familiar, unyielding, and intimate action made the corner of Luo Nan's lips move. He wished to reveal a smile, to declare to his aunt yet another loss on his part. This was an intentional technique he would use quite often, and it made his aunt the most pleased. But he performed it halfway before he wasn't able to perform it any further. This was because the 2 days of accumulated exhaustion, challenges, pressure, and most importantly, unrestrainable complicated feelings had all rushed to his head right at this very moment. They roared, seeking to find a chance to explode forth in a torrent. It seemed that any tiny pulling motion of his facial nerves would cause his weak embankment to collapse, to cause it to all come bursting forth. There was an instant when Luo Nan wished to pull his aunt to go back to the school, to point out the tree hole in gear for her to see, to ask her if she had the same feelings as he did. But thinking about it, his aunt didn't know an inkling about the situation with his mother, and so this impulse of his dissipated without a trace. Some things were destined to be bared solely by oneself, on one's shoulders. There wasn't anyone able to fully bear, to fully understand your feelings. Today, to have been able to allow Xie Junping that much entry was already a display of his abnormal loss of control over his mood. It would be very difficult for another instance to occur. 100 thoughts rumbled in his soul, but in the end, Luo Nan only raised his head up slightly to prevent his aunt from seeing the sorry state of his loss of control expression. But how to resolve such an unnatural action was already outside his scope of abilities. And right in the middle of his predicament, his wristband began to vibrate. Luo Nan practically turned his body instantaneously, his back facing his aunt. He took a deep, refreshing breath before letting the call go through. He heard a half-mature, but not fully mature voice immediately sound over. "Hey, handsome, you free? And what do you want?" Luo Nan had seen that it was Zhang Yingying's number. He didn't have the energy to get tangled up in words with this excessively vivacious woman. But the instant he opened his mouth, he was shocked at the degree of hoarseness and softness of his own voice. Luo Nan was scared that his aunt could hear the abnormality in his voice, so Luo Nan walked a few steps back into the house. Zhang Yingying was actually quite astute. She was able to figure out that there was something fishy about Luo Nan's state from his voice. She spoke inquisitively, "Bedtime, where are you?" Luo Nan adjusted his throat to use the shortest and clearest sentence he could muster. "At home." "Yep, I thought so. Anyway, your heart is quite big." A whole day went by without receiving a notification about the entrance evaluations. "Don't you know that you can call and ask?" Could Luo Nan say that he had already forgotten about this matter completely? Admirable, what happened to the motivated job seeker from this morning? I mean, I still remember even now, "Teacher, I want to be a staff member." This lady spoke with a high-pitched voice, fabricating these words that Luo Nan had never said. But Luo Nan actually laughed. There were truly far too many things that happened today. From Luo Nan's perspective, each event happened one after another in increasing severity. His thoughts were already squeezed into an extremely narrow space. This impromptu comedy act by Zhang Yingying made his mind become far more awake. The Professional Society for Ability Users, fine then. The Expedition Society was a place that he must fight for no matter what. Right now, he didn't have a surplus of strength, and what has happened has already happened. He'll stop carrying that desire to prevent his mood from becoming sentimental and fidgety. He then asked, "Has it begun?" "Ho. Right now, go make your way back in a hurry then." It's in the university activity area, outside of Acumen College's campus. At the Limestone Water Village pub. Your main examiner is just about to arrive. As for the specific details, I'll tell you about it clearly once you get there. I think that it's your moment to shine. Limestone Water Village pub. Couldn't this call have come 20 minutes earlier? Luo Nan was silent for a while, but he didn't speak any further. In the end, this call had given him a superb reason. He hung up, and his mind slowly came to. He turned around and faced his aunt with an open mouth. He didn't expect it to collide with the inquisitive gaze of Mrs. Luo Shuking. "You need to head out for this." Yes. A date." "It's not." Luo Nan immediately withdrew. "Then what is it?" Luo Shuking did not let him go. It's a gathering, a dinner get-together." "Limestone Water Village pub. I remember that it's close to your school. Why didn't you just go there directly? Can't you see that I forgot? While Luo Nan was handling this with great difficulty, he suddenly remembered something. Didn't Zhu Lei's girlfriend mention some related information this afternoon? He operated his wristband on the spot, and sure enough there was an invitation message in his inbox titled Acumen Mutual Assistance Meeting. As luck would have it, the Acumen Mutual Assistance Meeting was unexpectedly at the same location, at Limestone Water Village Pub. Right now the meeting time had already passed, but he could use this as an excuse. Luo Nan showed his aunt the message. This is the school's mutual assistance meeting activity. It's a very formal dinner. Mutual assistance meeting. How are you interested in that? Luo Shuqing could not have a better understanding of the temperament of a child within her own family. Would his introverted to autistic nature really place an importance on this sort of social situation? Luo Nan took out a ready-made argument. The school societies are all against outsiders. Things would be very troublesome without guidance from the words of seniors. I still haven't entered a society even now. I'm afraid of getting my school credit deducted, so. You didn't test into the Mystic Arts Research Society. Hick, that's right. You sought out the mutual assistance meeting on your own accord. No, they came looking for me. Luo Shuqing finally believed him after seeing her introverted and immature nephew's expression. She shook her head. Acumen College has been declining year after year, and it's been long since this started. Why did you want to get into this school so much? Luo Nan was silent, speaking not a word. Luo Shuqing had more to say, but suddenly she saw the familiar apartment furnishings behind Luo Nan's back combine, with Luo Nan's slim figure standing in the room. Her mind went 20 years into the past during this trance, and she saw another youth facing her with smile. Her heart felt a bit of pain when she looked. The spirited and soaring smile had already been swapped with the stiff and serious face of her nephew. The silent and oppressive atmosphere collected and amassed at the doorway. Luo Nan even believed that his argument had failed until he felt a slight shock on his face. His aunt had placed her palms on his face. She lightly patted. Then go tidy yourself up again. The handsome lad of the Luo family can't let people look down on him no matter what. Chapter 34, Elevator Entrance, Part 1-2. Luo Nan raised his head in amazement, meeting his auntie in the eyes. This successful career woman, who was the head department manager of a multinational corporation, just so happened to be frowning. Don't tell me that you're going to wear your school uniform to this dinner. Oh no, I'll go wash up. Luo Nan ran inside the apartment, having no idea how he passed the ordeal. He gave a glance to the study in the meantime, to the large black leather suitcase on the table. It was very conspicuous, but he didn't see any traces of it being moved. This made him let out another breath of relief. Luo Nan swapped to casual clothes very quickly, but Luo Shuqing really wasn't totally pleased with his outfit. It was clearly a formal dinner, but Luo Nan was even bringing his old-fashioned notebook. It was as if he was going to record notes at a meeting. What was this all about? In the end, she didn't mention it. She just said, "Let's go," and was the first to walk out the door. She clearly wanted to send Luo Nan to the dinner site. Luo Nan was already used to his aunt's intensive style. He followed her sincerely like an obedient child. The 20 minutes of travel time to the dinner site was doomed to be filled with struggles. His not even 1 month of high school life was interrogated from all sides, with importance placed on his relationships with other students. This area of Luo Nan's life was practically blank, and it made him be in quite the sorry state. He barely made it to Limestone Water Village pub. Luo Nan acted as the most conscientious driver, flying directly to the entrance of the establishment and indicating to Luo Nan that he could step off. Her sharp eyes swept across the pub's entrance in the meantime. Luo Nan knew his aunt's intentions, but there was nothing he could do about it. He could only pray a few times in his heart. He opened the door and got off the car, entering into the establishment. Perhaps his luck turned for the better as Luo Nan was able to discover the registry of the Mutual Assistance Group in the corner of the large hall, as indicated by the invitation. Though there was no one manning the station, there was still the electronic display. Luo Nan was soon able to find his own name. His aunt's call came through when he had finished signing. "Don't stay out too late. Give me a call when the dinner is over." Luo Nan's flying car flew away outside the pub. Only then did Luo Nan relax a bit. Luo Nan had swept his vision onto the number of people registered when he was registering. There were actually over 1,000 people. There existed an upper limit to the number of members in a society of Acumen College. This sort of scale wouldn't appear in any of them. Only a get-together could exceed the limitations of a society and draw forth a large show of this sort. So there were this many people, one more wouldn't be much, one less wouldn't be much. He didn't need to run over and attract the distaste of others. Anyway, this fellow Zhang Yingying was really not reliable. The sound of her voice made it seem like she had been waiting in the pub for a long time. But now, there wasn't a trace of her in sight. Luo Nan was just about to contact her, but a chuckling voice came from behind him before he could make the call. "Nanster, I thought you would never come." It was the voice of his comrade. The buff Zhu Lei walked over with large strides, and right at his side was none other than his girlfriend, Chen Weican. The two had high statures and long limbs. They came to be in front of him with just a few steps of effort. Luo Nan rushed to stop his call. He felt both awkwardness and bafflement. Didn't these two get this information far too quickly? He had just arrived and just signed his name. Things would have been quite manageable if it were just Zhu Lei. But Luo Nan had to perform proper etiquette in front of Chen Weican. "Sorry, Senior Chen. I was busy and I came late." Chen Weican's lips actually pursed into a smile. "Actually, Lister and I never expected that you would come. I was shocked when the registry sent out the message." Luo Nan didn't know how to respond for a time. It seemed that Chen Weican had drunk some alcohol. Her cheeks were slightly red. She spoke much more straightforwardly. "Anyway, it's good that you were able to come, Nanster. This counts as giving me face. After all, your signature counts as my accomplishment." The conversation had already moved to this point. Obviously, Luo Nan couldn't say, "Actually, I didn't want to come. I actually need to go now." He could only follow these two into the banquet hall. It was just as Chen Weican said. This cold dinner meal gathering was made very formal. Big shots of the student council sponsored the event, reserving the entirety of banquet hall number 1. The scene was extremely large. Banquet hall number 1 was on the 27th floor. There were no idle elevators in the large hall, and the three chatted as they waited. A few sentences into the conversation, and Chen Weican starting speaking about matters involving societies. This was also the reason why she invited Luo Nan in the first place. "I've already found people in regards to the matter with societies. I'll bring you and Lister to go meet them on the way back. Do your best to pick a society that's more to your calling." Don't say that there isn't a society you're interested in, Lister. Is there a meaning in taking 6 years to take 3 years of coursework from lack of credit? Zhu Lei sealed his lips, saying not a word. Unfortunately, Luo Nan was unable to keep his mouth shut. Senior, as for the matter with societies, actually. Chen Zirolin wrinkled her brow. You applied earlier. Luo Nan nodded respectfully. You applied at Li Ming's place. A blush of red flushed to Chen Zirolin's face, and this wasn't solely due to the alcohol. She spoke with fury. Junior, I told you before, matters involving societies are complicated. It's not as simple as you think. Do you know where Li Ming is right now? He's right in this establishment, in the box seats, accepting hospitality. Even if you can't handle his pressure, which place do you think is more effective? In his office or here? She's drunk. Zhu Lei first mentioned this to Luo Nan in a low voice, before turning to face Chen Zirolin in Luo Nan's defense. I assure you that Nanster didn't go through with it at Elder Ming's place. I am willing to testify for him. Elder Ming was quite furious at the time. Luo Nan was able to see that Chen Zirolin wasn't angry. Instead, she was baffled that Zhu Lei actually hadn't explained the situation clearly to her at the time. Then Luo Nan asked something of Zhu Lei in a low voice, and Zhu Lei shrugged. Isn't there that senior Zai with his extensive inside connections? My communications skills aren't that great. Luo Nan immediately understood that his peer Zhu Lei knew quite well what he was doing in his mind, even though he was buff and he did look boorish. He absolutely wasn't a meathead with an empty brain. What are you guys talking about? Chen Zirolin glared with a frown. The alcohol had gotten to her head at this moment, making her look charming and innocent. Luo Nan and Zhu Lei raised their heads together. They were just about to explain when the elevator door opened and a dozen or so people walked out from inside. Their mood looked to be quite decent, with laughter going all around. Zhu Lei was not interested at all in these people. He blocked the elevator door and let Luo Nan and Chen Zirolin inside. He never expected Chen Zirolin to yank him. Hold on. Do you see that person? The one who just came out of the elevator, the youngest. It's whom I just mentioned before, the vice president of the school's student council, Chen Weican. He's the chairperson of the mutual assistance group and my immediate superior. Both Luo Nan and Zhu Lei looked over in that direction. The group of people had already walked out of the large hall and were outside chatting amiably. Things weren't too clear under the contrast of light, but they recalled that there weren't too many youngsters within that group. Chen Zirolin took a few deep breaths, trying to decrease the effect of alcohol on her mind. Soon she informed them, Senior Chen possesses true power within the school's student council. I think his family has some military contacts. His character is normally quite decent, and normally we have an all-right relationship since we are both Chens. I didn't ask him, but I did mention a few words to him. Things will become a lot easier to handle for sure. This meant that they would have to talk to him. Zhu Lei's and Luo Nan's gazes linked up. They could both see the lack of interest in each other's eyes. However, the corner of Zhu Lei's mouth soon went down. Chen Zirolin had actually kicked him with her high heels. Chapter 34, Elevator Entrance, Part 2-2. Look at those who walked out in his company. Just based off of who I recognized alone, they include the brains of the Parents Association, the Council, and the Society Operations Bureau. He invited all of them to the dinner, gathering to talk about standards. Elder Ming's qualifications aren't enough to come inside. You go chat him up, just a few words. It'll save me a lot of trouble." Indeed, Chen Xiaolin was becoming exasperated that things weren't turning out as she expected. Zhu Lei had a huge frown on his face. He really couldn't do something like this. Before victory could be determined between these two, Chen Weican sent off those honored guests that mentioned standards and headed off back inside the hall with the rest of his party. Chen Xiaolin saw him draw closer, and she gave Zhu Lei a hidden push to remind him to open the elevator door. Then she approached Chen Weican engagingly and cheerfully. "Chair Chen." Chen Xiaolin greeted several high-ranking members of the Mutual Assistance Group in succession. Zhu Lei hesitated for a moment, not moving a single step and falling a pace behind. Chen Xiaolin turned around from the front, and soon her expression went stiff. Luo Nan could see that the situation wasn't good. He gave Zhu Lei a push and stood next to the elevator entrance, positioning himself into an awaiting posture. By the time Luo Nan raised his head, Zhu Lei only gave the opposite party a greeting. The opportunity to exchange words was soon dead in the water, and it was mainly Chen Xiaolin who was propping the scene. The party of people headed inside the elevator. Chen Weican leading the group was really quite remarkable. He had a large and tall stature. He wasn't particularly handsome, but his gentle smile made him seem a bit distant. He also greeted back at Chen Xiaolin and Zhu Lei, not lacking in etiquette at all. However, his footsteps never stopped moving as he headed directly into the elevator. He was clearly the type of person to let other people match his pace, a rather powerful and influential character. In comparison, Luo Nan felt that he was quite like a bellboy from the way he stood by the elevator entrance. Another batch of people just came down the large hall through the pub's entrance. The person in lead was a woman wearing a professional dress and carrying a rather old-fashioned folder. Her gait was hasty, and she looked to be a white-collar worker. Behind her was 4 rather lean and buff males. They moved hastily as well. This group's pace was quite faster than that of Chen Weican. Most notable was the white-colored woman leading the front. Her height certainly exceeded 170 centimeters, with 5-centimeter long slender heels beneath her feet. The pants of the traditional suit she wore was nothing special, but they lined against her tall, slender, and beautiful figure. Most of all were her long legs that were beneath those slim-fit pants. Those contours were beautiful, simply striking at one's core. Chen Xiaolin was already a tall and lean beauty who was present, but she was shorter than this white-collared woman by half a head. This difference was made the most distinctly when the two passed each other. The model figure of this white-collared woman really made people exclaim in awe, but her gait wasn't the catwalk gait of a model. Her strides were large in distance as she moved forward perfectly straight. The 4 buff dudes followed behind her arduously. They were only able to see this white-collared woman's facial features, which matched her figure precisely when she drew close. Her contours were clear and solid, as if she were like a sculpture, but they contained a cold harshness that prevented strangers from getting too close. In the end, whether or not she was beautiful was secondary to this. Right now her brows were furrowed, making her seem to be lost in thought, deliberating over some issue. She walked straight into the opened elevator, paying no attention to those nearby. The several buff males followed her inside, milling around to squeeze into the small space of the elevator. Fine then, Luo Nan had truly become a bellboy right now. Chen Weican was somewhat surprised when the white-collared woman walked past like a gale of wind. Through the light within the elevator, he could see this white-collared woman's face. It was as if he woke from a dream. He spoke out probingly. "He, sister, he." The white-collared woman raised her head, and her gaze swept across Chen Weican's face. Her brows furrowed even deeper. Clearly she recognized who he was. Chen Weican was confident in his conjecture. He immediately caught up to her with 2 steps and spoke with laughter. "Hello, sister he, I'm Chen Weican. My father is the Vice Chief of Staff for Xie City's Near Defense Force, Chen Hanxing." He made his way into the elevator with a single step. Obviously those beneath him, Chen Xiaorolin, Zhu Lei, and etc., had to follow him inside. Chen Weican moved rather majestically and imposingly. The white-collared woman swept her gaze across the crowd of faces at this moment, her face unable to be read. However, Chen Weican recalled a certain rumor. With a split-second decision, his hand stayed at the entrance of the elevator to completely cut off the people behind him. His forearm even touched something at this moment, but he was disinclined to pay attention to this. His body was half-slanted as he spoke in a low voice without explaining. "You all take the next elevator." He pressed the button to close the elevator upon speaking, blocking the others outside. "My God!" Luo Nan heard Zhu Lei curse, clearly besides him. Then he saw Zhu Lei's face turn dark. Zhu Lei wished to press the elevator's button, but he had some time wasted by being 2 people away from the elevator. The elevator was already on its way up by the time he got there. He was a step too late, no matter what. He looked at Chen Xiaorolin once more to see that she was actually embracing her bosom at this time. Chen Weican had touched her chest just now when he had reached out with his hand to block them. This was a very inappropriate action. Obviously, they all could have fit into one elevator, so splitting them into 2 batches was a rather arrogant action. Zhu Lei was a straightforward person, but this didn't mean he didn't have a temper. His eyes glared wide as he looked at several high-ranking members of the Mutual Assistance Group. His expression contained quite the ill will. It seemed like he was about to brandish his tongue, to explode forth at this moment. Those who were able to mix themselves into the high ranks of a multi-society organization, like the Mutual Assistance Group, were all the cream of the crop. They had a deep understanding of Chen Weican. Even though they felt resentment in their hearts, they had to maintain and protect their chairman's face as well as their own faces. There was someone present who laughed. "It's probably that major sponsor. Apparently the chairman's been pushing quite hard. Is he using his handsome charms to sway her?" Chen Xiaorolin awoke to the side. She pulled Zhu Lei to a stop and spoke in a low voice. "He didn't do it on purpose. Look at that woman, even she knew it was bad to stir up trouble." Perhaps these words were logical, but from Zhu Lei's perspective, they skirted by the issue far too much. They were spun without a hint of sincerity. They were complete dog shit. He rotated his gaze upon the group of people outside the elevator, including Chen Xiaorolin, and his breathing grew heavy. The fury in his heart was clearly escalating. Luo Nan saw his state and was just about to stand forth, but then his elbow slightly went down and a cheerful voice entered his ear. "You impolite fellow, you really didn't wait outside. I nearly missed you. Luckily I have good eyes." Zhang Yingying had come. Luo Nan turned his head and saw that this female lawyer had swapped to a completely different outfit than the one she wore on the warship. She wore a denim jacket that matched with her miniskirt and had her long white legs exposed. Her feet were wrapped with Roman sandals, which exposed her toes. This near-summer outfit radiated energy all around. Zhang Yingying's sudden appearance had actually somewhat eased the tense situation. Chen Xiaorolin could feel the fury of her boyfriend. This, combined with the obvious damage to her honor, made her unable to figure out how to placate the situation for a time. She was trying to figure out how to dispel Zhu Lei's fury, while not provoking the members of the mutual assistance group. She could only try shifting the topic. First, she pulled Zhu Lei by his arm so their postures matched perfectly with Luo Nan's and Zhang Yingying's. She forced a smile and greeted, "Is this your girlfriend, Nanster?" Luo Nan was just about to shake his head, but Zhang Yingying had already responded with giggling laughter. "Nice to meet everyone, Tilda. I am Luo Nan's #1 pursuer. Just Yingying is fine." That's a wrap for this installment. Thank you all for watching and supporting Lord of the Stories. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more amazing stories. You can also explore other series updated daily in our playlists. Have a fantastic day and see you in the next episode.